Hello, advanced social psychology students. So the purpose of this video is for me to lead the Prade and Saroglow article discussion for this week, March 24th to March 30th. And so let's begin. Hopefully, there we go. So I really like this article. It's from 2023, so it's not as new as some, or not as recent as some of the other articles that we're reading this semester. But it looks at social conformity, and one of the variables that it's examining to see the extent to which it affects social conformity is awe. And so the prior research that's discussed in the article, they talk about how there's very little research that explores the effect of positive emotions on conformity. They have found that gratitude increases social conformity, but joy does not. But this paper really focused on awe. On social conformity. As a control group, they, have a control where there's nothing or neutral, but they also had a control group that's another positive emotion, that's also like arousal provoking, amusement. And so they're going to compare awe and amusement in addition to a neutral condition to make sure that it's not a positive emotion or something that's positive that has some arousal effect. And it's actually the experience of awe that's affecting conformity. And so when we look at conformity, as you know from the chapter that you read this week and such, or last week actually, there's two different kinds of conformity. There's normative conformity and informational conformity. And so informational conformity is the conformity that we do because we believe other people know more than we know. We desire accurate information, and oftentimes the majority is correct. I mean, and especially if you believe that the majority of people are experts or something like that. Normative conformity is when we conform so that we will get social acceptance, so that we'll be liked, so as not to rock the boat, so everyone will get along. It's not that we think the other people are correct. We just are going to, even if needed, go with the wrong answer just because everyone will get along more. So these are the two different kinds of conformity and that the authors are going to examine. Actually, they're the only two types of conformity, social conformity, and the authors in this paper examine both kinds. So why would they think that awe might affect social conformity? Well, awe may be the emotional reaction we have to powerful or prestigious group members. And this would be adaptive because it would increase attention toward the powerful. And it would sort of keep the social dominance orientation in a group working, which keeps order in the society, so to speak, and especially if you're thinking about like tribes from a long, long time ago, not the complex societies that we have now. And so this is why they thought that maybe awe, the experience of awe, would lead to some kind of social conformity. So what do we know about awe so far? So awe has been found to lead to feelings of humility, feelings of oneness with others, pro-sociality, which means that pro-social, we're going to help other people more. And maybe the authors were thinking, as we're pro-social, as we're going to help people more, maybe this would increase our likelihood to adopt group norms and be more likely to obey the majority or the authority, maybe even imitate the majority or authority. And that's actually been found. I just misspoke when I said the authors were seeing if this would happen. This is research that has been found. Awe also, they postulate that it shifts a person from thinking about themselves as a unique individual to their collective identity. We talked when we did the self chapter about the social identity wheel and how which groups are around us will lead us to feel less like an individual and more like a group member. So this collective awe may lead to this collective identity. awe experiences also are likely when we perceive an uncertain environment, when we're scared, when we have less control, when we're not sure what's going on. And social conformity in these situations could actually increase survival, especially if the people that we're conforming to are correct. If they really do know the best places to go in a bomb shelter and this kind of thing. So these are some reasons why the authors thought that maybe awe would lead to social conformity. So they do 2 experiments. In the first experiment, they're looking at normative social influence. So this is you're conforming with other people so they'll like you, to get along, to not rock the boat. And then in study 2, they're going to look at awe with informational social influence. This is when you conform to people who know more than you. You're conforming because you believe they're more likely to have the right answer. And it may be because the people who you're conforming to actually know the right answer, or it could be that there's an assumption that if the majority of people think this, that's more likely to be true. Okay. And in the first study, they're going to experimentally induce awe. And in the second study, what they do in both studies, actually. So the main independent variable that's in both studies is the emotional state. They actually, in study 1, they ask people to remember a time when you either felt awe or you felt neutral or you felt amusement. And then you're supposed to write about this time, journal about this time when you had these feelings. That's how they induced it. In study 2, they induce it by having you watch a 3-minute video. And the 3-minute video clips were designed so they'd either put someone in a state of awe, in a more neutral state, or a state of amusement. And so, but these are the main independent variables, or the main independent variable is emotional state, awe, neutral, or amusement. So study 1, like I said, you're randomly assigned to either be awe, neutral, amusement condition. You were supposed to do an autobiographical memory to elicit one of these emotional states. And sure enough, the manipulation check showed that people had to indicate how much they felt on a 5-point scale, how much awe they felt, how much amusement, joy, pride, enthusiasm, sadness, and a total of 10 different moods or affective states, emotional states. And sure enough, people in the awe condition indicated that they were feeling more awe. People in the amusement condition indicated they were feeling more amused, and people in the neutral condition indicated they were feeling pretty neutral. Then for the conformity measure, they had people read short portraits of people that describe their goals and aspirations that indicate their values. And one of the values was actually conformity. And then the actual participants, after they read this portraits of people, they're supposed to indicate how much they think they're like the person that's described in the portrait. And sure enough, as expected, those in the awe condition said that they felt like they had more in common with the portrait of the person who valued conformity, much more so than in the amusement or the neutral conditions. And the amusement and neutral condition, they did not differ from one another. So that was the hypothesis. That's what they expected. What was even more interesting was the mediational analysis. They wanted to see what was mediating this. And what they found was that feelings related to awe, so the average of awe, fascination, curiosity, or whatever, mediated the relationship between the condition that you were in and the conformity. So even if you were in the awe condition, if you did not have great feelings of awe, then you were less likely to socially conform. So it really seems to be the case that being in a state of awe increased your likelihood to say that you were more similar to someone who valued conformity. So you see, this is the normative type of conformity. In study 2, instead of doing the think about a time when you had awe and write about it, or think about a time when you felt very amused and write about it, here they're going to have people watch a 3-minute video. And the video was either to put someone in a state of awe, amusement, or neutral. And sure enough, people who were in the awe condition did indeed, at the end of the study, say, yes, I felt much more awe than those in the other conditions. Then the neutral, they felt more neutral. And the amusement, they indicated they were more amused. So the manipulation checks worked. The video was successful in getting people to the state they were trying to get to. Then once they watched the video to be in this state, they were shown these blue geometric shapes that differed in the contrast with the background, like how much ones they stood out. And in a pretest, 68% of the people preferred one shape, so that this shape stood out from the background more than the other. Participants, though, were told, in fact, that the majority of people chose the other shape. So they were misled, and they were given the response that fewer people had chosen, but they were told, though, that it's what they had chosen. I mean, that what the majority of people had chosen. And then they were supposed to indicate which one they thought was right. And what they found is that participants in the awe condition conform more, 52% of them conform more than those in the other two conditions. In amusement, it was only 37%, and in neutral, it was only 32%. And the neutral and amusement, even though it looks like a 5% difference, that was not statistically significantly different. So they're equal to one another. And what is kind of interesting is in those conditions, they're acting very much like the nonconformity pretest. So it's, if you think about the 100 minus 68, you're at 32%. So you can see that the people in the amusement condition and the neutral condition acted very much like people in the pretest. However, those in the awe condition were statistically significantly more likely to conform and give a different answer. So just a 3-minute video had this big of an effect. So the conclusion is that awe does indeed promote social conformity, both normative social influence and informational social influence. Awe may serve a vital social function by enhancing the motivation to keep society intact, providing a nonviolent way for allocating power and submission to a greater entity. If you think of society. I know for me, when I first read this study, I was like, whoa, because I love to experience awe. Do you know what I mean? Whether it's walking in nature or reading spiritual material or, looking at my grandson. And I never in a million years would have thought that those experiences would lead me at that moment then to be more likely to socially conform. And so this is good information for me to have so that I make sure that I'm conforming to the extent that I want to conform. Now, there are some limitations of the study. Only private conformity was measured because, participants were doing this online. This needs to be replicated with actual face-to-face groups before I'll really believe it. But there's enough here where I'm going to be really aware every time that I experience awe. Ooh, I want to make sure that I don't lead to socially conform if I don't want to. Would we find the same results with awe of childbirth or a tornado that's coming through or positive experiences? Again, we don't know. Awe is associated with openness to experience and creativity. Like in a whole bunch of data. How does this fit with social conformity? Because people who score high in the personality trait of openness are not necessarily seen as more likely to socially conform. And creative people like I don't know, my stereotype of a very creative person is not someone who's especially likely to socially conform. So how does this all fit together? Now you guys came up with some really cool discussion questions. I will say, other than Tanya, who's leading the discussion of the other article, everybody summarized this article that did a summary. Lots of students, quite a few of you chose not to summarize either of the articles this week. I don't know if like spring break was a lot, and so this is one of the articles that you're skipping, but or decided to skip. But 4 people summarized this article. So, and you guys came up with great questions. One person came up with 2 of these questions. So, how does different positive emotions affect social conformity? How does different negative emotions affect social conformity? Great questions. I'm dying to see this week when we're discussing this, what you guys think. How might experiencing awe in everyday life influence people's willingness to follow group opinions or social norms? This study suggests it would. It'll be interesting to see whether you think it would be more likely to happen with huge awe experiences or more day-to-day awe experiences. Can increasing conformity from awe be harmful in situations where the majority opinion is wrong or unethical? I would think absolutely. Why or why not? It'll be interesting to hear those of you that go, no, Mary, I think you're wrong, which is great. Then explain why. And those of you that agree with me, why do you think that? Do you think emotions like awe can low-key make you follow the crowd more? This research would say, yes, it does. Do you agree with it? And why or why not? Do you think we'd find this in the real world? And in what ways could experiences of awe, such as exposure to powerful social media content, natural disasters, inspirational events, affect people's decision-making and likelihood of following majority opinions? It's kind of similar to one of the other ones too. So you really get the sense, I think we're all on the same page of going, how much would we find this in the real world? And when do we think it would work, and how do we think it would work? And what do you think of the boundary conditions? Like, it would work here, but we don't think it would work here. So I'm dying to hear what you guys think. It should be a fun week discussing these. All right. Remember, this is due, today is March 24th. So I believe this discussion will end on March 30th. So, all right. Have a great week.